I knew something was wrong the moment I opened the car door, but I didn't understand why until it was already too late. The driver's seat was pushed back farther than I ever leave it. The mirror was angled slightly downward, and the air inside smelled wrong. Not bad. Not rotten. Just unfamiliar, like a stranger's presence still hanging there, warm and recent. I stood frozen in the parking lot, keys clutched in my hand, listening to my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, and one terrifying thought repeated over and over in my head. Someone was sitting in my car last night. Asterisk, I tried to laugh it off at first. People notice strange things all the time and invent meanings where there are none. That's what I told myself as I slid into the seat, adjusted the mirror back, and started the engine. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling that the car no longer felt like mine. Every sound seemed louder than usual. The click of the seatbelt, the hum of the engine, the soft whir of the air conditioner. I checked the back seat twice before pulling out, embarrassed by my own paranoia. But the unease followed me all the way to work like a shadow that refused to separate from my feet. Asterisk, I work late most nights. That's always been my routine. I manage inventory for a small warehouse on the edge of the city, the kind of place no one notices unless something goes wrong. By the time my shift ends, the streets are quiet, empty in that unsettling way where silence feels deliberate rather than peaceful. Normally, I enjoy the drive home. It gives me time to decompress, to let the day drain out of me before I reach my apartment. That night, though, every red light felt too long, every dark intersection too exposed. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see someone sitting behind me, watching. Asterisk, when I parked outside my building, I stayed in the car longer than usual. The engine idled while I stared at my reflection in the windshield, my face pale under the dim streetlight. I told myself I was tired, that my brain was inventing threats because it needed sleep. Still, before I stepped out, I locked the car twice and tugged on the handle to make sure it was secure. The metal felt cold and solid, safe, or so I thought. Asterisk, the next morning, I found the passenger door unlocked. Asterisk, it's a small thing. Anyone could forget to lock a door. I've done it before. But I know for a fact I checked it the night before. I remember the sound of the lock engaging, the little mechanical click that signals finality. I stood there staring at the door, my breath visible in the early morning air, trying to reconstruct the night in my head. Had I been distracted? Had I imagined locking it? Or had someone actually opened it after I left? Asterisk, inside the car, everything looked normal. Too normal. No missing items. No broken compartments. The glove box was closed. The radio was set to the same station. I always leave it on. That somehow made it worse. Whoever had been there hadn't been looking for anything. They hadn't taken anything. They had just been there. Asterisk, that day, I mentioned it casually to a coworker, framing it like a joke. He laughed and told me it was probably just stress, maybe someone checking doors for loose change. Happens all the time, he said. You're fine. I nodded, smiled, pretended his reassurance worked. It didn't. Asterisk, that night, I parked in a different spot, directly under a working streetlight. I checked the back seat before locking up. I checked under the car. I even glanced into the empty space between vehicles, feeling ridiculous but unable to stop myself. When I went upstairs, I stood at my window for a long time, watching my car below like a guard on duty. Nothing moved. No shadows shifted. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I went to bed. I woke up at 3:12 a.m. at first. I didn't know what had pulled me from sleep. There was no sound, no nightmare lingering in my mind. Just a sudden sharp awareness, like my body had decided I needed to be awake. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening. The apartment was silent. Then my phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. Asterisk, a notification. From my car app. Asterisk, vehicle unlocked. Asterisk, I sat up so fast, I felt dizzy. My heart hammered as I stared at the screen, hoping I had misread it. The timestamp glowed back at me, undeniable. I grabbed my phone and rushed to the window. The streetlight flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. My car sat there, unchanged, still, empty. Then the interior light turned on. I couldn't see much from that distance, just a faint glow inside the cabin. My breath caught in my throat. The rational part of my mind scrambled for explanations. Faulty wiring, app glitch, anything. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Someone was inside my car. Asterisk, I watched for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than a minute. The light stayed on. No doors opened. No movement I could see. My legs felt weak. I didn't know what to do. Call the police? Run downstairs? Yell? Every option felt wrong, dangerous in its own way. Finally, the light turned off. I didn't sleep again that night. By morning, the car was locked. The app showed no new notifications. No record of the unlock event at all, as if it had never happened. I went down cautiously, half expecting to find broken glass or signs of forced entry. There was nothing. Inside, the seat was adjusted again. The mirror tilted just enough to notice. That's when I found the imprint. On the driver's seat, faint but unmistakable, was the impression of someone who had been sitting there for a long time. Not just sat, settled. The fabric was slightly creased, pressed down in a way that didn't happen from a quick intrusion. I touched it with trembling fingers. It was cold now, but my mind filled in the rest. Someone waiting. Someone patient. I called in sick that day. I spent hours researching online, scrolling through forums and articles about car break-ins, sleepwalking, carbon monoxide poisoning. Anything that could explain what was happening without invoking something darker. I checked my apartment for leaks. Bought a detector. I installed a small camera facing the parking area, angling it so it captured my car clearly. If someone was doing this, I would see them. I needed proof. I needed something solid. Asterisk, that night, I sat in my apartment with all the lights off, watching the camera feed on my laptop. The grainy black and white image showed my car under the streetlight, perfectly still. Midnight passed. 1 a.m., 2. My eyes burned, but I forced myself to stay awake. I couldn't risk missing it. Asterisk, at 3:11 a.m., the car door opened. Asterisk, I sucked in a sharp breath and leaned closer to the screen. The door moved slowly, deliberately, as if whoever was opening it didn't want to make noise. The interior light came on. For a moment, the angle obscured the person's body. Then they stepped inside. Asterisk, the camera quality wasn't great, but I could see enough. A figure, average build, face obscured by the angle and shadows. They sat in the driver's seat and didn't move. Just sat there, hands resting in their lap, head slightly bowed. Minutes passed. I waited for them to start the engine, to search through compartments, to do something. They didn't. Asterisk, they were just sitting. Asterisk, I realized then that they were facing forward, staring out through the windshield. Toward my building, toward my window. My stomach dropped. I slammed the laptop shut and backed away, suddenly certain that if I kept watching, something irreversible would happen. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, lights on, heart racing at every sound. Asterisk, in the morning, I checked the recording. Asterisk, the file existed. But the moment the figure entered the car, the video corrupted into static. The timestamp jumped forward an hour. Then the door closed. Nothing else. Asterisk, I took the footage to the police. They listened politely, watched the glitching video, and exchanged looks that told me everything. No sign of forced entry. No clear suspect. They suggested changing parking spots, maybe installing better lighting. One of them asked, gently, if I'd been under a lot of stress lately. I stopped arguing after that. Days passed. Then a week. Nothing happened. I almost convinced myself it was over, that whatever strange fixation had targeted my car had moved on. I started sleeping again, letting my guard down. That's when I found the note. It was tucked into the cup holder, folded neatly, as if placed with care. My hands shook as I opened it. Asterisk, you left the light on. Asterisk, I stood there in the parking lot, the paper fluttering between my fingers, and understood something terrible. This wasn't random. This wasn't about the car. This was about me. And whoever had been sitting there last night was getting closer. I didn't tell anyone about the note. Not the police, not my coworkers, not even my sister, who usually heard every minor inconvenience in my life. The moment I read those 4 words, something inside me locked shut. A quiet understanding settled in my chest, heavy and cold. If I acknowledged it out loud, if I let someone else see how afraid I really was, then it would become real in a way I couldn't undo. Asterisk, you left the light on. Asterisk, it wasn't threatening. That was the worst part. It sounded familiar, casual, like something a neighbor might say, or a friend teasing you about being careless. Whoever wrote it hadn't been angry. They hadn't needed to rush. They'd had time to sit there, in my car, in the dark, noticing details about my habits. Asterisk, I drove to work with the windows down despite the cold, as if fresh air could push out the invisible residue of someone else's presence. Every stoplight felt exposed. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not just from behind or beside me, but from inside the car itself. Like the seat still remembered the weight of someone who didn't belong. Asterisk, that night, I didn't go straight home. Asterisk, I parked 2 blocks away and walked, scanning every doorway, every parked vehicle, every shadow that felt just a little too deep. My building looked the same as always, dull and unremarkable. No one followed me inside. No one stood waiting in the stairwell. I checked my apartment carefully before locking the door behind me. Asterisk, for the first time since this started, I slept somewhere other than my bedroom. I dragged blankets onto the couch, left the lights on, and kept my phone in my hand until exhaustion finally dragged me under. Asterisk, I dreamed of sitting in my car. Asterisk, I was in the driver's seat, hands folded in my lap, staring straight ahead. The streetlight outside flickered endlessly, bathing the world in pulses of light and shadow. I knew I was supposed to move, to start the engine, to leave, but my body refused to obey. Then I felt it someone sitting behind me, so close I could feel their breath warming the back of my neck. Asterisk, you left the light on, they whispered. Asterisk, I woke up choking on air, my heart pounding so hard it made my chest ache. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I stayed awake until morning, watching the door, listening for sounds that never came. For 3 days, nothing happened. No notifications. No unlocked doors. No notes. The quiet was worse than the fear. It made me doubt myself, made me replay every moment, searching for signs I might have imagined it all. Maybe the note had been a prank. Maybe the app had glitched. Maybe stress had finally cracked something inside my head. Asterisk, on the 4th night, I forgot my charger in the car. Asterisk, I realized it just as I was about to go to bed. My phone battery hovered at 12%. I stood in my living room staring at the door, arguing with myself. I could survive one night without a charger. I could go in the morning. But the thought of leaving the car untouched, of letting it sit out there without checking, made my skin crawl. I grabbed my keys. The parking lot was empty. Silent, except for the distant hum of traffic. My footsteps sounded unnaturally loud. When I reached my car, I hesitated before unlocking it, bracing myself for what I might find. Asterisk. The interior light came on. The driver's seat was pushed back. The mirror was angled down. Asterisk, and something else was different. The radio was on. Low volume. Static, broken occasionally by fragments of voices that dissolved before I could understand them. I stood frozen, keys still in the door, my breath fogging the air. Slowly, I leaned in and turned the radio off. That's when I noticed the indentation in the passenger seat, got asterisk fresh, as if someone had just stood up. I didn't remember backing away. I only remember running. I didn't stop until I was back inside my apartment. The door locked, my back pressed against it as I slid down onto the floor, shaking. That night, someone knocked on my door. Not loudly. Not urgently. 3 soft, deliberate taps. Asterisk. I held my breath, every muscle locked in place. The knock came again, exactly the same rhythm. I could hear my blood rushing in my ears. Whoever was out there wasn't in a hurry. They weren't worried about being heard. They knew I was awake. "I know you're home," a voice said quietly. Asterisk. It was a man's voice. Calm. Even. Close enough that it sounded like he was speaking directly into the door. My mouth went dry. I pressed a hand over it to keep from making a sound. Asterisk. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay," he continued. "You ran earlier." Asterisk. My knees threatened to give out. He sounded concerned. Like this was all a misunderstanding. Asterisk. "We don't have to do this tonight," he said after a moment. "I'll come back." Asterisk. Footsteps moved away from the door, unhurried. I stayed where I was for hours, until the sun began to rise and the world outside slowly returned to something resembling normal. Asterisk. The next day, I called in sick again. I started packing. Asterisk. I didn't know where I would go, only that I couldn't stay. I stuffed clothes into bags, hands trembling, my mind racing. I avoided the windows. I didn't look at the parking lot. I just focused on leaving. Asterisk. Halfway through packing, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You forgot your charger." Asterisk. My stomach twisted violently. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. It landed face up on the bed, the screen still glowing. Another message appeared. Asterisk. It's still in the car. Asterisk. I sat there staring at it, a horrible realization sinking in. He wasn't guessing. He knew exactly what I'd been looking for. He knew my routines better than I did. Asterisk. You don't have to be scared, the next message read. I'm just watching. I grabbed my phone and typed back before I could stop myself. Who are you? The reply came instantly. Someone who noticed you first. Asterisk. I blocked the number. Turned my phone off. Finished packing with frantic speed. I left my apartment an hour later, carrying everything I could manage, heart pounding with every step down the stairs. The parking lot was empty. My car sat under the streetlight, unchanged. I didn't go near it. I loaded my bags into a rideshare vehicle and left without looking back. Asterisk. I stayed with my sister for a while. I told her someone had been bothering me, left out the details that sounded insane even in my own head. She didn't press. She was just glad I was safe. Asterisk. Weeks passed. Then months. Asterisk. Slowly, the tension in my shoulders eased. I slept through the night. I stopped checking locks obsessively. I even started to believe I'd escaped, that whatever fixation had attached itself to me had been tied to that place. That car. I bought a new car. I didn't tell anyone about it. I paid in cash, used a different dealership, changed my number. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control again. Asterisk, on the first night, I parked it outside my sister's place. I double-checked the locks and went inside, heart steady, breathing even. Asterisk, at 3:12 a.m. My phone buzzed. A notification from the new Cars app. Interior light turned on. Asterisk, I stared at the screen, numb. Slowly, mechanically, I walked to the window and looked out. The car door was open. The interior light glowed softly. Asterisk, and inside, just barely visible through the windshield, someone sat in the driver's seat, facing the house, facing me. Asterisk, my phone buzzed again. A message. You still leave the light on. Asterisk, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching as the figure inside my car tilted his head slightly, as if listening, as if he could hear my breathing through the glass. Asterisk, that was when I understood the truth I'd been avoiding since the beginning. Asterisk, it was never about the car. Asterisk, the car was just the closest place to me when he couldn't be inside my home. Asterisk, and now that he knew where I slept, where I felt safe, he didn't need it anymore. The interior light turned off. The door closed. Asterisk, and somewhere downstairs, very softly, very patiently, someone knocked on the front door. 3 times. Exactly the same way.